All right, this is part 5, diagnosing reading difficulties. Some questions to think about. What are the limitations of standardized tests for reading? What's the best way to diagnose a reading problem? Do all struggling readers require the same treatment? When documenting reading fluency, what do you do about miscues, and how do you assess and document students' attitude towards reading? So let's get down to it. Standardized tests are limited in what they show us, and we all know that. It's a single snapshot taken in time. Students are asked to read a paragraph and select a bubble, and in my adult working life, I have never had to read a paragraph and select a bubble. Now, standardized tests are a tool. They're one tool. They can be an effective tool, but any tool's effectiveness is dependent on how they are used, and standardized tests tend to be overused. Good assessment, by the way, is like taking soil samples. To get a sense of what kind of soil you have, you don't dig up the whole lawn, you take little bits, little soil samples at different places. In the same way, good assessment takes little bits of assessment over time. Performance on a standardized test is impacted by many things. Reading a paragraph, comprehension, it's impacted by the vocabulary used, the content, the sentence structure, interest in what you're reading, and students' emotional state. These all impact students' performance on standardized tests on that single snapshot taken in a little instant of time. And as I said before, when you want to get a soil sample, you don't dig up the whole lawn. A more accurate type of assessment for reading would be little snapshots taken over time. And here's the thing about standardized tests. I have yet to find a standardized test that gives me information about what exactly am I going to do on Monday morning on a standardized test. However, qualitative reading inventory, informal reading inventory, a Miscue analysis, this gives me the information that I need to inform me of exactly what needs to be done. And that's not a standardized test. A qualitative reading inventory, diagnostic reading inventory goes by different names, informal reading inventory. In reading, there are 3 deficit areas: fluency, comprehension, and word identification or word recognition. Now, struggling readers are not standardized entities. They're not all the same. Some students may struggle on all 3, some 1, some 2. They're not all the same. And here's the big idea related to struggling readers. This is why one size does not fit all. You buy a program, but what if the student just struggles with comprehension? Do they need the same word identification and fluency stuff? No. This is why the diagnostic is so important. This is why a Miscue analysis, along with a comprehension measure or a qualitative reading inventory, is so important. Now, the thing about when we are finding grade levels, so-and-so is reading at this grade level. Grade levels are always an estimate. One's ability to read, to comprehend, to understand is influenced by their knowledge of the topic, the words used, the sentence structure, the grammar. These impact comprehension. If I know a lot about something, I can read it with a great deal of comprehension. If I know little, not so much. So yes, grade level estimates. Grade levels are estimate. When someone is reading at such and such a grade level or Lexa level or whatever it is, it tells us something, but these should always be considered estimates because one's ability to read and understand anything is impacted by a lot of different variables. Now, here's something I'd like you to think about. Could you imagine going to the doctor and that doctor not asking you questions, not asking you to describe the symptoms, just running tests? No, but we do that for our readers all the time. We just give them a stinking test. We don't ask them anything. So we need to include students' attitudes and perceptions if we're going to do a diagnostic. And before I sit down with any kid and do a Miscue analysis, I always say, well, tell me about your reading. What things give you problems? What do you do when you get to a word you don't recognize? What do you do if you don't? These are questions we should be asking and writing down the answers. What makes reading hard for you? What would you like your reading teacher to know or do? What kinds of things do you like to read? Not all of these, but some of these questions should be asked. Again, could you imagine going to a doctor and the doctor not saying, how's it going? Tell me about your back. What did you do? No, absolutely not. So here's the thing. We can create these reading attitude surveys, and they come in a variety of forms, and I'll show you some of these. I enjoy reading. I'm able to read, and you can decide what kind of numbers you want to use and descriptors, limited only by your imagination. You can find these online with younger students. Come in a variety of forms. Here's someone's 9th grade class. Come in a variety of forms. Quantify, of course, I think keep it simple, keep it simple, keep it simple. I probably wouldn't include that many questions. You don't need a lot. And here's the thing. As far as progress monitoring, you could have a very simple thing, something like that. And that can be used to show change over time. That should be part of your progress monitoring. Students' attitude towards reading. Remember, reading is a pleasurable act. What do we do to make it not pleasurable? We should start with that assumption because reading is pleasurable. So we need to help students find the joy of reading. Remember, teachers' #1 job is to help children fall in love with books. #2 job, not frustrate or humiliate. All right, let's get down to diagnosing reading difficulties. First, just for basic word identification, the running record is the best thing. And keep it simple. The thing about a running record, of course, is this has to be done individually. You have a graded reader or a leveled reader, which simply says this is readable by students at the 2nd grade level or the 3rd grade level or 2nd year, 5th month. The child or the student reads orally, you just put a check mark above the words that were errored or miscued or not correctly read. All right, the errors. We call them errors here. All right, miscues, we'll talk about that in just a minute. Then you're able to identify the approximate reading grade level based on how many words they correctly identified. And that would be grade level for word identification. Because often students can comprehend at one level, but their word identification is at another level. All right, so here you go. You got your graded reader. This is 3rd grade, 6th month. Simply put a check over the words that the student incorrectly identified or recognized. And then to determine the levels at a particular grade level, 98% or more, that's the independent level, the instructional level, and the frustration level. So you can say at the 3rd grade level, this student read at the instructional level. On a 3rd grade text, the student reads at the instructional level. At the 2nd grade, the independent level. So when working with that student, with a teacher, you'd create a scaffold, but you would want material at the instructional level. When students are reading independently, self-selected reading, practice reading, they should be reading at the independent level or below. That means they should be able to recognize 98% of the words. And this is why it's a good idea to have a sense of students reading grade level, a sense of that. All right, that is the running record, and you can use any piece of graded text or level text. You can also use actual books. If you look on the back of a book, there's usually a grade level. Actual book, when I do this, if it's a picture book, I want them to use the picture, but for myself, I just type up the text on a picture book and I'm able to put a check mark there. All right? Adopt and adapt. Use your teacher creativity and intelligence for this. Okay, a miscue analysis. This is very key. Now you can buy the official qualitative reading inventory, which I recommend. It takes a little thinker-rating, and I explain this in my book. But you have to you can't just open this up and follow the directions. But what I like about this is it values teachers' experience, teachers' knowledge, teachers' expertise in understanding their students. What you do is you have students read, this is the basics, by the way, a piece of graded text again, and you look for the types of miscues. Now again, the student reads orally and you audio record that so you can go back and you can analyze what they did, looking for the types of miscues that they make. And as I explained earlier, a miscue is when what the student reads out loud does not match what's on the page. We don't call them errors because sometimes they're mature reading behaviors. There's different types of miscues. There's the meaning disrupting miscue. You deduct 1 point for this. The dog rat up the hill versus the dog ran up the hill. That would be a meaning disrupting miscue. A meaningful miscue, you deduct half a point. The dog runs up the hill versus the dog ran up the hill. It doesn't match. It's a miscue, but it still makes sense. And I put an M in the text. And then a self-correction, that's a good thing. That represents metacognition. The student makes a miscue, reads on, goes back, and self-corrects. I put a big SC in the text. So as the student is reading the graded text, I have a piece of text in front of me, and I'm making marks, and I'm writing my observations in the margin. But I cannot rely on myself to analyze in time, in real time. So that's why you always audio tape and you go back and you analyze the text. Now, the first time you do it, you'll feel uncomfortable. You just have to do a couple of these miscue analysis until you feel comfortable doing it, and you will over time. It may seem very abstract and uncomfortable the first time you do it, but you have to do 2 or 3 and then you get a good sense of where you're going with this. Now, once I've analyzed the miscues, I have a miscue analyzing sheet where I write down the target word and what the student says. I then look for patterns, and that gives me a good sense of where the student is at, the types of mistakes, what I need to do on Monday. And I put a check here if it's a meaning disrupting miscue, a check here if it's a meaningful miscue. Deduct 1 point for meaning disruptive, half a point for meaning maintaining or meaningful miscue. Number of self-corrections, number of meaningful miscues, and I can do fluency scores here, and I'll show you that in a minute. But I'm deducting points. I have the total number of words, total number of miscue points, and I deduct the number of words minus the miscue points, so I get a percentage of the words correct. So I can say at the 3rd grade level, this student scored at the 98th percentile, or whatever. It gives me a sense of the grade level as well as the types of things I need to teach on Monday morning. All right, and I get fluency and some other stuff. All right, What about comprehension? Well, as part of the Miscue Analysis, they ask some comprehension questions there, so you can do that. But you can also, comprehension worksheets aren't very good. Reading a paragraph and filling out bubbles, okay, they're so-so. But I like the retelling chart for comprehension. It gives us an estimate. And these are created by the teacher, adopt and adapt. And this is for a non-fiction story. You have the child's name, grade, date, the story title, or the text or the chapter, and the reading level. Is it read by the child silently, orally, or is it read to the child? So after you read a text or chapter, the topic, you identify the concepts, could be 2, 3, 4, 5, and important elements related or underneath each concept. You then ask the student to tell you about what they read. All right, so they read it and they have to retell. That tells us if they comprehended, if they understood, and if they remembered. And if it is unprompted, they get 2 points. Prompted, they get 1 point. So you look at the total number of points and deduct. You're able to find the percentage, independent level, 90 to 100%, 75 to 80, frustration. You get the sense. This gives you comprehension levels, different from word identification levels. These are comprehension levels. And this is for expository, and this is for narrative text. A little bit different. Characters, setting, events, and this is a simplified version. Child reads, asks to retell, asks the child, tell me about the characters, tell me about the settings, tell me about the events, prompted, unprompted, and levels. You get the idea. Maze for comprehension. Now, this is a validated instrument that you can use. And what I like about this, 2 things. It can be given in large groups. You don't have to do this one individually. A maze, you have a paragraph or short bit of text, and they have 3 words, 2 of which have a similar grammatical function and 1 which is totally different. And the student reads through and has to select the correct word. What I like about this is it enables students to use all 3 cueing systems: syntax, semantics, and phonics, to identify the correct words as they're reading. Number correct, number of errors, and you can figure that out. Now you can buy, of course, official commercial ones, or you can create your own maze for comprehension based on reading grade levels. But I like that. I like this. This is a validated instrument, and this is a more authentic way to assess comprehension because they're reading a passage just like we do in real life. And then fluency. Find a graded or level text, time the students as they read, and figure out the words per minute score. And you can say words per minute, this student read 74 words per minute at grade level 2 or grade level 3. Now, are there standardized reading rates for age or grade level? Well, there are, but I would ignore these because here's the thing. If you're reading a difficult text, you should read slower. If you're reading easy narrative text, you read faster. So we want students to slow down when they're reading hard or expository text. What we use words per minute scores for is just to give us a sense of progress monitoring, to see where they're at. And as we're listening to reading fluency, we're also making marks in the margins about prosody. Some use expression, but prosody, reading prosody is when reading orally, does the inflection and pauses sound similar to oral speaking? Notice how I'm pausing between sentences and ideas. My inflection goes up or down correctly. Questions, all right? That tells me if the child is comprehension prosody, or do they read word by word in a stilted manner. Prosody, do they read with expression, meaning does their oral reading sound like a person talking? Expression, I don't like that because the only time I really have to read with expression is if I'm reading a play or something. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter if I read with expression. All right, words per minute versus words correct per minute. We use words per minute. There are other places to measure word identification. So some people say, no, you should measure words correct per minute. No, processing, fluency is the ability to process text quickly. That's all we're concerned with a fluency score. How fast can that child process the text? So words per minute, not words correct per minute. And the question is always asked, well, what if they just throw in any word? Well, here's the thing. This is why we measure words per minute versus words correct per minute. If the child is just throwing in any words, that student still has to stop, process, think of another word, and put it in there all in the microseconds. So that's actually going to slow the student down. So we don't care about words correct here. We're just looking at speed. There are other places to measure accuracy. You do that in a running record in the Miscue Analysis. Fluency score is only concerned about speed of processing. And it's a great way to measure progress, and you can do that in different ways. Remember the three deficiency areas: word identification, fluency, and comprehension. They're measured differently. You address them differently. All right, and to find words per minute, you can say start, read for a minute, and stop. Okay, that's okay. It's not as accurate. Or you can use this: total time in seconds divided by 60 equals the minutes. 90 seconds divided by 60 equals 1.5 minutes. I forgot to put 60 in there. Total words divided by minutes equal words per minute. 100 words divided by 1.5 equals 66 words per minute. And that formula is in my book as well. But that's how, and that's why if you're doing a Miscue analysis, you time it. If you're doing a running record, you time it, because you can find fluency scores at the same time. You don't have to do a separate fluency test. All right, here's a great activity to develop fluency and word recognition. Adopt and adapt. It's called sentence replay. You give the students 3 to 6 sentences, depending. The students read it aloud and record it, audio record it with your iPad or a telephone or phone, a cell phone of some sort. The student reviews and underlines the stumble words, listens to it, listens to the recording, reads it again, and circles the stumble words or puts a second line under stumble words again, and repeats until fluency is achieved. Now you can do this with a partner, which is great. The first partner does the first 3, the second do the second 3. And one partner is the recorder, other person is the reader. And here I am reinforcing the AY phonogram, which I just happen to be teaching. I just include an AY word in each sentence. So yes, I'm developing word recognition and fluency, and I'm reinforcing a letter sound or letter pattern at the same time. This is a very good strategy. A very good strategy, very effective. I would encourage you to try that. All right, what are some of the limitations of standardized testing? Well, it's just a snapshot in time, and it doesn't tell me exactly what I need to do on Monday morning. It simply tells us how far away the student is from average. What's the best way to diagnose a reading problem? Deficit areas, fluency, comprehension, word identification, a Miscue analysis, and or a qualitative reading inventory. If I use a Miscue analysis, I'm going to use some sort of story retelling chart for comprehension. Do all struggling readers require the same sort of treatment? Well, they don't have a disease. We're not giving a treatment. We are we are addressing their deficiency areas, but no, struggling readers are not the same. One size does not fit all. When documenting reading fluency, what do you do about miscues? You ignore them, miscues and errors, because we're just looking at the speed of processing. How do you assess and document students' attitude towards reading? Well, it's very important. Some sort of simple Likert scale or reading attitude survey. All right, our next one, we'll be looking at comprehension, assessment, and academic standards.